Have you ever stopped to think about where our rights actually come from? I mean, really, why do we even have governments? Well, way back in the 17th century, a philosopher named John Locke was wrestling with these exact same questions, and he laid it all out in his incredible work, Two Treatises of Government. Today, we're going to dive deep into his most foundational idea, the state of nature. It's a concept that completely changed how we think about freedom, justice, and government. And you know what? Let's just kick things off with Locke's own words, because they really set the stage. This idea that we all start out on a level playing field, that no one is naturally a king, and no one is born a slave. I mean, that was an absolutely revolutionary thought for his time. It's the bedrock of everything he's about to argue, and it's where our whole story begins. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to explore this wild idea of perfect freedom. Then, we'll see what stops that freedom from becoming total chaos, this thing called the universal law of reason. After that, we get to the really radical part. Everyone gets to be the judge. We'll see why that system has a fatal flaw, and finally, how that flaw leads us right to the doorstep of government. All right, Section 1, Locke's perfect freedom. So, to even begin to understand why we have governments, Locke says we have to do a little thought experiment. We need to rewind the clock, way back, and imagine what life was like before any kings, presidents, or laws. He calls this the state of nature. So what is this state of nature exactly? Well, Locke defines it as our factory settings, you could say. It's a state of perfect freedom, where you get to decide your own actions and what to do with your stuff. And it's a state of perfect equality. The absolute key here is that nobody is born with the right to rule over anyone else. You're your own boss, period. So we've got perfect freedom, total equality, power is shared. But then Locke hits us with a really important but. This is not, and he's very clear on this, a state of license. It's not a free-for-all, do whatever you want kind of situation. So if there are no rules and no police, what's to stop it from just becoming pure chaos? And that question brings us right to Section 2, the universal law of reason. This is Locke's genius answer. It's the invisible rulebook for a world without any rulers. It's the thing that keeps perfect freedom from just spiraling into total anarchy. And here's the core of it. Locke argues that even in this original natural state, there's a law that applies to absolutely everyone. So what is this profound universal law? It's simply reason, the ability to think rationally. His point is that morality isn't just something society makes up. It's something we can all figure out for ourselves just by using our heads. So what does this law of reason actually tell us to do? Well, it's pretty straightforward. First, because we're all equal, nobody should harm anyone else in their life, health, freedom, or property. Now, Locke's grounding for this was theological. He argued we're all created by God, so we're his property, not each other's to mess with. And that leads to two basic duties. First, you have to preserve yourself. And second, when you can, you have to help preserve everyone else. This right here, this is the very beginning of what we now call natural rights. Okay, this all sounds great, but it brings up a huge practical question, which is what Section 3 is all about. Everyone is the judge. I mean, if you have this wonderful law of reason, but there's no police, no courts, who actually enforces it? Who makes sure people follow the rules? Locke's answer is kind of wild. He says that the power to enforce the law of nature is in everyone's hands. That's right. If someone breaks the law, if they steal from you, if they attack you, then you, and in fact anybody else, has the right to punish them. But now, hold on, this isn't a blank check for revenge. Locke is super clear that punishment can't just be based on passion. It has to serve two and only two legitimate goals. The first is reparation. That means making it up to the person who was harmed. The second is restraint. The punishment has to be just enough to make the offender and anyone else watching think twice before ever doing it again. And this distinction is really important. A single crime creates two separate rights. The right of reparation belongs only to the victim. They're the only one who can demand to be made whole. But the right of punishment, that belongs to everybody. Why? Because a crime against one person is seen as a threat to everyone's safety, so everyone has a stake in stopping that criminal. Now, this whole system sounds pretty logical on paper, right? But Locke was a realist. He knew people weren't perfect. And that brings us to the big plot twist in his argument, right here in Section 4, the system's fatal flaw. He very politely calls these inconveniences. And here's the question that basically unravels the whole thing. Locke himself says it's totally unreasonable for people to be judges in their own cases. We all know that. But in the state of nature, that's exactly what's happening. So what happens when you have this massive conflict of interest baked into the system? Well, our human nature just gets in the way. Self-love makes us go easy on ourselves and our friends. We're biased. And on the flip side, ill nature, passion and revenge, makes us punish our enemies way too harshly. Our judgment gets totally clouded, and real justice goes right out the window. And the inevitable result of all this? Locke doesn't sugarcoat it. He says it leads to nothing but confusion and disorder. That peaceful state of nature, so perfect in theory, just breaks down into a chaotic, violent mess in practice, all because of our own biases. So, if we're all stuck in this state of confusion and disorder, how do we get out? Well, that leads us to our final section, number 5, the escape to government. This is Locke's grand solution to the whole problem. And the solution, for Locke, is crystal clear. The proper fix for all these problems is civil government. The whole reason we create governments in the first place is to have a neutral, impartial judge who can settle our fights based on known rules. A government's main job is to be the referee. But, and this is a gigantic but, not just any government will do. Think about it. The problem in the state of nature is that we're all biased judges. Well, what's an absolute monarch? He's just one guy who's the judge in his own case too, except now he has an entire army to back up his biased decisions. For Locke, that's not a solution. That's way, way worse. So this is the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. How do we legitimately leave this chaotic state of nature and create that impartial judge? This quote says it all. We do it by our own consent. We voluntarily agree to give up our personal power to punish and hand that power over to a community. The only legitimate government is one built on the consent of the governed. So let's just do a quick recap. We start in a state of nature, a place of perfect freedom and equality, all guided by reason. The big flaw is that our own biases make us terrible judges, which leads to chaos. So the remedy is for all of us to agree, to consent, to create a government that can act as a neutral referee for everyone. It's a pretty elegant argument when you lay it all out. And that leaves us with one last massive question that people have been asking ever since. Locke brilliantly explained why we need government to save us from our own flaws. But that just leads to the next big problem. Once you've made that government, how do you escape from its flaws? That's a question Locke also thought about, and it's one we are all for sure still trying to answer today.